A very happy Wednesday to each of you. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, and happy to have you with us, enjoying some beautiful weather here this spring. Fun show for us. A lot of it today centering around some of the things that JT Daniels said when he met with the media yesterday. And boy, I tell you, Daniels is a good talker, man. I feel like, and I'll talk about this during the show, but he really strikes the right balance between like the swagger and confidence you want a quarterback to have, and also just kind of the natural humility that you also want players to have, makes them easy to root for. I think Daniels got both those things. Really very, very impressive, spokesman for the Georgia football programs. We'll do a lot of that on today's show. Mike GRIFFITH stopping by there as well. But most importantly, you're here because we couldn't do it without you and our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. So what do you say we get it started? DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harris Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So many of you know me to be pretty odd as an adult. There's some things about me that just make me a little strange. I don't, shy away from that. I am readily willing to admit that. You're probably not surprised to also find out I was kind of strange as a child, too. Some of the things I did when I was a child are just different than what other children would have done growing up back in the 80s when I did. For instance, there was a TV show that I loved when I was a kid that most kids probably weren't watching. And if you were around in the 80s, you kind of know what I'm talking about. You remember the movie show, Siskel and Ebert? I think it was called At the Movies, and they had like the thumbs up, thumbs down they would do to rate movies. I loved that show. Now, as an adult in 2021, I don't really like movie critics very much. Still like movies. I don't really like movie critics very much. But back then, I loved Siskel and Ebert. I loved the thumbs up. I loved the thumbs down. I was sort of fascinated by the way in which they argued about movies, kind of like we argue about sports sometimes. I just liked the whole thing. And one of the guys on the show since then has passed away. His name was Roger Ebert. And one of the things Roger Ebert said one time that I thought was really interesting, he said that when a movie fails, the acting in the movie is usually the last reason why. In other words, if you go to the movies not good, there's a lot of reasons why that may be true, but the acting being bad is the least likely reason, he believes, that a movie ends up failing. That if the movie's not good, it's more because the script was bad, the director wasn't good, whatever else. And listen, I don't know enough about movies to know if that's true or not, but it kind of makes sense to me. I definitely think that's true when it comes to college football, if you want to kind of make the comparison here for a moment. That when a college football team doesn't achieve its goals, you can blame the players if you want to, but in the world of big-time college football, it's the coaches who are paid the millions of dollars. It's their job to get the most out of the players. So when a season kind of falls short of what it's supposed to be, to me, I look to the coaches and say, hey, what didn't you do to get more out of these players? Much the same way old-time movie critic says acting is the least likely reason a movie fails. To me, the players themselves are the least likely reason that a team would fail. If a player's good enough to be chosen to be at Georgia, then he's good enough to kind of cross the threshold of being able to get it done. But when it doesn't happen, sometimes it seems like the coaches, maybe they didn't do everything they could have done. Maybe they didn't have the most enjoyable game plan. All the pieces kind of in place there. And the reason why I bring all that up is because when you go back and look at Georgia football over the course of the last couple of years, I think for a while there was kind of a disturbing trend in place for the Georgia Bulldogs. And listen, it's not pleasant to talk about this, and sometimes we kind of like to, not really pay attention to that. But it seems like for a couple of years, we had a lot of players leaving Georgia, much the same way that, go back to the Roger Ebert analogy of, hey, bad script, actors didn't get the most out of them. It almost seemed like maybe Georgia had kind of a bad play calling script, not getting the most out of its offensive talent. Think about after the 2018 season. All the guys that left as juniors that could have come back. And in the case of McCole Hardman, he gets drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs second round, and he's had a big-time NFL career. But a lot of the other guys that left off that team that could have returned for 2019, they didn't get drafted at all, or they got drafted relatively low. And it seems like they could have improved their draft position by staying in Georgia, but for whatever reason, It's just not something they wanted to do. And then you have the situation with Jake Fromm in 2019. And listen, I'm never going to pick on a guy for making a decision that he thought was best for him. But to me, it didn't speak super well of Georgia that Jake Fromm, when he could have come back to Georgia, been the starting quarterback, you would have presumed in 2020, and had a chance to improve his draft position, said, no, I'll go take a shot in this draft, even if I'm a late round pick, and even if I'm only a third string quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. In Fromm's mind, apparently that was still better than coming back to Georgia for this past season, and or for the season that was 2020. And as I said before, I'm not going to dog on any Georgia player who made the decision to leave, but certainly it seemed like a lot of offensive players after the 2018 season, after the 2019 season, looked at the situation at UGA and said, I just don't really want to be a part of this. I either don't believe in this system getting the most out of me, or believe this is a team on its way to a national championship. One way or another, it just doesn't seem all that fun or all that worthwhile to stay. And I don't take pleasure in telling you that today, but when you look at some of the stuff that happened after the course of those last couple of years, I do think you sort of take away and say, boy, that wasn't a great endorsement of the situation at Georgia, that so many juniors left this program, and by doing so ended up not really being very high draft picks. They just seemed to be kind of done with their time there at Georgia. Well, if that was true then, the good news is that does not seem to be true anymore, not at all. That all of a sudden now there's a new crop of players at Georgia, and all of a sudden now, led by an offensive coordinator in Todd Monken, there seems to be a belief, wow, that this offense this year might be designed to get the most out of my talents, might be designed to get the most out of my abilities, and who knows, we may just come together and win a national championship here this year. The level of optimism that seems to exist with some Georgia players, guys like Zamir White or James Cook and others who could have moved on to the NFL draft, chose not to. Boy, it really seems like there's just a new mood around the Georgia program related to all of that. And if you didn't already believe that, as a way of validating this even more, when JT Daniels, the Georgia starting quarterback, spoke with reporters yesterday, and boy, what a refreshing, drink of water that was, to kind of hear Daniels in great detail describe his feelings about the upcoming season and what his Georgia teammates feel about the upcoming season. This was all really good, but for me, the place I want to begin, and the spot that I thought in the Daniels press conference yesterday that was the most interesting, was Daniels' description of how many Georgia players are just buying in right now to what this offense is going to do for them this year, and what they have a chance to do in this offense. Guys that had a choice to leave, deciding to come back. Daniels himself, by the way, I guess, would be one of these guys there as well. That clearly seems to be a theme in place for Georgia this upcoming season. Very good stuff from JT Daniels on this. Here he is.
I do think there's a lot of guys that really knew what we have and the potential that we have. And one, love to win, two, love to compete, and want to put themselves in a good light as possible before they finish their career in college and head to the next level.
Guys who love to win, guys who love to compete, and let's face it, a lot of guys play football for money, but there is still an aspect of this that's about just the natural competitive spirit that's inside you, and the fact that football at the major college level is just kind of really fun. Daniel says there are a lot of guys who are kind of driven by that, and they wanted more of this at Georgia because they also think that Georgia has a chance to get them where they want to go with their professional aspirations as well. In fact, Daniels went into even more detail about exactly how much of a theme that has been for Georgia throughout the early stages of the calendar year and the early portion of the offseason, as guys were doing their conditioning work and getting ready to go. The notion of coming back to Georgia with a big purpose in mind. Apparently, JT Daniels says that's something they've talked about a lot.
Unfinished business. Run It Back was the name of our dog time, 6 a.m. conditioning time. There's definitely been a level of that, and that we did have a lot of guys come back, and a lot of really good players, a lot of experienced players come back to try and make a push and make a difference in Georgia football this year.
And listen, obviously for JT, who wants to be a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft, and guys like Zamir White, James Cook, and many of these wide receivers who have, big-time offensive linemen there as well, who have, big-time pro aspirations, that's a part of this. It's their audition for those NFL scouts who will clearly be watching them closely. But as I've told you all before, one of the cool things that I think about major college football right now is the way that individual goals and team goals seem to be fairly closely aligned. the teams that have the most high draft picks, first-round picks, things like that, also seem to be doing really well on the field as well. The LSUs, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, multiple first-round picks also leading to national championships. And with Georgia, that idea not lost on JT Daniels either. Guys who had choices to go to the NFL this year decided not to, come back to Georgia, who want to show what they're all about in an offense they think that's going to get the most out of them. And obviously the eventual byproduct to that could be the kind of team success, the national championship that Georgia fans have been craving now for such a long time. For those championship-starved Georgia fans, you'll love these words from JT Daniels for sure.
There's no denying that you want to win a natty. I think we have the team to do it. Absolutely, it's a great team. I think we've done, and Coach Smart's done a really good job of instilling a team standard and team DNA that a lot of the guys have really taken accustomed to. There's a lot of good things going for the team. There's just things we got to focus on, things we got to develop, because we have the team, to do whatever we want.
Let me see if I can sum this up this way. There is no doubt that what Georgia is trying to do, be as good offensively as you need to be to keep pace with the best, most high-powered offense in the country. There is no doubt that's an incredibly difficult task. And as Daniel said, and I edited this part of that last quote out just for sake of time, there is no doubt that losing George Pickens makes that a little bit more difficult. Not impossible though, just a little bit more difficult. But while we acknowledge on the one hand that it's really hard to be as good offensively as you need to be as good as the very best teams in the country, I think we also need to be paying very close attention to something. That a very interesting transition seems to be occurring with Georgia. This last season, especially in the second half of last season, once I believe that Todd Monken's system kind of got more firmly entrenched at Georgia, and certainly Daniels when he emerged as the starting quarterback, I think the personality of this program evolved, and I think offense became a bigger part of this than it had ever been before in terms of the way in which folks thought about Georgia football prior to the arrival of Todd Monken and the emergence of JT Daniels. This team's still got a long way to go as far as being as good as it wants to be, but the process towards getting there, I believe, began last year. This is a more fun team to watch now than it's been in the past. I think it's a more fun team to play for than maybe it's been in the past. I think the fact that guys chose to come back for the 2021 season, JT Daniels included, I think is the evidence you need to support that. And that fun, entertaining brand of football, high scoring, getting in the end zone, that has been a recipe for national championship success for many teams over the last few years. And who knows, maybe Daniels turns out to be right and true, and here in 2021, that also could be a recipe for UGA as well. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Great to have you with us. Video platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960, the Ref podcast, all those platforms there as well, including posting the show each and every day at the world-famous DawgNation.com. For those of you that share your comments there to be a part of our podcast cool down at the end of the show, we certainly appreciate that, and we appreciate our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort for making all this possible. I told our video audience before we began today, the weather right now is just gorgeous. What a great time to be here in the state of Georgia, around the southeast. And if you're in the Atlanta area where I am, don't forget, just a 2-hour drive right now. Both the Harris Cherokee Casino Resort properties, the original Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, Harris Cherokee Valley River, all the great amenities, whether it be the socially distanced gaming floor, the gourmet restaurants, the world-class spa, luxury shopping. As I've been telling you, the book is now open, sports gaming there now in the mountains of western North Carolina. A lot of folks enjoying that for the NCAA tournament over the course of the last few weeks. Of course, getting your action down on the big golf tournament in Augusta this weekend too. All kinds of great opportunities for you to do that right there at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, the book sports book. So to find out more about this and just kind of how you can book your travel and enjoy a great weekend getaway or however long you want to stay, go to the website Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee for a whole lot more on that. Big day from JT Daniels yesterday in terms of talking about his goals for the upcoming season. We'll talk to Mike Griffith some more about that coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse here today. And I want to go back to something. I know I've talked about this a few times, but I really did take a lot from something that former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards said on our show a couple of weeks ago about the value that can exist for a team when your vocal leader, the guy that everybody looks to, is the position that we most commonly think about when it comes to leadership, and that's your quarterback. We just heard some really cool words from JT Daniels. Terrence Edwards thinks that JT Daniels has a chance to really capitalize on a leadership platform this year. And the great former Georgia wide receiver, when he was here on DawgNation Daily a couple of weeks ago, talked about how much Georgia can be in a better position because of the leadership that he believes that Daniels can provide. Great reminder on the basis of what we heard from Daniels yesterday. Here is Terrence Edwards.
It's just different when your quarterback is a leader. It just hits a little different when everyone believes that if the chips get down, we have a guy that can lead us. I mean, just prime example, Tom Brady went to the Bucs, and his leadership, even though he was there 1 year, he's still Tom Brady, and he brings a wealth of leadership and experience that the team rallied behind and believed in. And when you have a team that believes in your quarterback and believes in his play, it both and provides a different type of energy that the team would carry on to the game when the times get tough. They believe that this guy can lead us.
I think that's great from Terrence Edwards. I think he's probably right about that. And here's the thing that I've also said before, that sometimes in sports, leadership is simply a product of seniority. Think about the aging veteran sitting on the bench for an NBA team who's there because he's a good locker room guy, or the backup catcher on a Major League Baseball team who knows how to manage that pitching staff and knows how to, keep everybody from getting a little too nervous. Sometimes in sports, leadership is just a function of seniority. But in football, I don't really think that's the case. I think that leadership is really a product of competency. Have you proven your ability to kind of master the situation on the field? And if you have, given the fact that football is a violent game where you're putting your own health and safety on the line and really at the forced to trust your teammates in terms of kind of keeping you safe on a football field, I think it takes competency to earn leadership stripe. Leadership credentials, I think, are based on what you can prove on the field. And that's why something in a lot of what Terrence Edwards said there, something that Kirby Smart also said this week is so interesting, that in terms of why JT Daniels may be becoming a leader, it's because of the poise and confidence that he's showing and getting his day job done. Being the quarterback that functions in this offense and runs that the way that it's supposed to. It certainly seems like, from Kirby Smart's perspective, one of the reasons why folks are willing to trust JT as a leader is because Daniels seems to know what he's doing with the ball in the hand, in the huddle, to the extent that Georgia huddles, and certainly in these offensive meetings, that the command that Daniels has over the Georgia offense is one of the ways in which that he now has the credibility to be the leader that Terrence Edwards says good quarterbacks need to be. Here is Kirby Smart.
JT's always been about his business. That's JT. JT's very serious. He's very into it. He has growth he can go through, and for him, continuity is important. And we haven't had great continuity with this back out, that receiver out, he's out. So we've been ping-ponging guys around. That's always tough. But I think he's asserted himself more in terms of command of the offense. Get the signal, get the call, hurry up, let's go. Oh, we're too late for this motion. We got to get into the call. There's a lot of things that help you feel comfortable in terms of being able to call plays. As an offensive coordinator, he understands those things and does a good job.
So good stuff from Kirby. And here's the thing I think that's really interesting about JT Daniels. You want your quarterback to have a certain degree of swagger. You want there to be, I love the phrase that sometimes analysts use, athletic arrogance, the idea of self-confidence. You believe you have the capability of getting that done. There's a certain degree of that you want from a quarterback. But when it comes to, fitting in a locker room and being a good teammate, being a guy that other people want to, spend time around, it can't all be swagger, right? It can't all be athletic arrogance, because at a certain point in time, people have a tendency to tune that out. You want there to be a kind of a parallel track of humility to go along with a healthy dose of, self-confidence and belief in yourself. You want there to be both, and I think that JT Daniels does a pretty good job of demonstrating both, because on the theme of this, Terrence Edwards says, I want my quarterback to be a leader. I think JT Daniels can. Kirby Smart explaining the way in which Daniels has asserted himself more as a leader. When Daniels, in the press conference we've already played clips from yesterday, when he was asked directly about how he feels about his own leadership, instead of taking a whole bunch of time to brag on himself, really mentioned himself in the category of other Georgia players who he also views as being leaders. Another example of what I said before of, self-confidence paired with humility. Certainly Daniels, on the topic of leadership, kind of displays this when he kind of, puts himself in a category of guys he also views to be leaders on this Georgia team.
It's something we talk about a lot as a team, is that everybody on the team is a leader, whether you just joined and you're a walk-on, or you're Jamari Salyer, or you're Lewis, or you're Speed, or any of them. I think obviously your role expands the more you play, and you just have a bigger platform in that area. But I think since I've been here, I've always tried to take the approach of first leading by example. And then once I think you earn a certain level of trust in your teammates from them seeing how you work and knowing that you're here for them, that you can start being more vocal and doing more things.
I mean, listen, when you hear the Daniel stuff from yesterday and some of the things that other players have said about him and what Kirby Smart has said, it is just really, really nice to know that everybody's kind of saying the right stuff right now. Daniel's tone, I think, is almost perfect for what you want a quarterback to be. The other players and talking about this kind of stuff are also saying the right things. And yes, I know, I have that healthy dose of cynicism in me. Many of you have that in you that, well, this can be faked, right? And you can pretend to believe all the things that you're saying, but not actually live that out and not actually show up and work every day with all that kind of stuff in mind. It's certainly possible. But let's face it, there are some players, some programs that can't even find a way to fake it right now. Can't even find a way to kind of conjure up the feelings that JT was able to yesterday. So I'm going to take it to mean something, even if it's not in and of itself proof this team is heading towards its final destination. JT is certainly not afraid to acknowledge what that final destination is supposed to be, use the phrase national championship out loud yesterday, and he seems to be want to be a leader towards getting that done. I think it was all really nice to hear. A great press conference. Fun day for Georgia yesterday with JT Daniels stepping up to speak to reporters. We'll talk to Mike Griffith about this coming up in a moment. There in Athens is where Mike is. Before that, though, speaking of Athens, boy, what a hot real estate market the Athens area is right now. Many of you are aware of that. And as someone in myself who kind of likes to study the real estate market, one of the things I always kind of think about is, the Athens market is almost different than any other market in the state of Georgia. Many of you want to be there, whether it's as an investment property owner. Obviously, a lot of college kids kind of coming in and around that town all the time, or you want your own kind of like game day condo thing, something along those lines, or you just want to live there, retire there, something like that. Well, when you get involved in the Athens real estate market, you want an expert, local expert who knows that market there to do that for you. That's what 5 Market Realty is going to be able to do for you. They're helping you move to Athens, become an investor there in Athens, retire, whatever you want to do. Game day condo, the whole thing there. They are a 2021 Bulldog 100 list, so you're doing business with good dog folks. That's one of the reasons why we love recommending 5 Market Realty. They're just really fun to be with, fellow dog fans. All of it really, really good. So check out this website, 5mrealty.com. 5mrealty.com. That's going to connect you with a local real estate expert right there in the Athens area. So for your investment property, your retirement property, or your just new home, you want to move and raise your kids and family there in the Athens area. 5 Market Realty, the real estate experts to trust there in the Athens community. It's great to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Before we're done, new developments in the saga of ARIK Gilbert. We'll tell you about that on the program here today. But for now, on everything for Georgia spring practice, heading towards G-Day next Saturday, let's talk to Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So we'll say hello to Mike Griffith here, obviously doing a great job covering Georgia spring practice as it rolls on from the city of Athens, and he joins us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort today. And Mike, I played a lot of audio from JT Daniels' press conference yesterday before you joined us. And listen, as I acknowledge to the cynics out there, and I think we all have a tendency to be a little cynical from time to time. I try not to be, but every now and then I am. It'd be easy to disregard it and say, well, obviously, talk is cheap this time of year, blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is, when you step up, speak as articulately as Daniels did yesterday, when you point clear leadership in the direction of where Georgia wants to go, national championship, those words do mean something to me yesterday. I think that Daniels is a refreshing breath of air, is that what I'm trying to say? When it comes to, really all of the notes that he kind of touches on, strikes in a press conference like this. I really enjoyed hearing from him, and frankly, hearing from JT makes me more excited about the upcoming season. What did you think of the quarterback getting a chance to talk yesterday?
Yeah, everything you just said. I thought he sounded really good. I think he's authentic. I think he's a legit leader. I posted a story this morning about everything he said, putting it in context as far as the leadership, the compassion, the teamwork. That's who he is. I mean, this is a guy that I think has vastly been overlooked and underrated I don't think people really stop and think about it. You know, he played his freshman year at Southern California when he should have been a senior in high school. That's a lot. And Southern Cal only went 500, and I think because of that, a lot of people might have overlooked JT or forgotten all about him. He would have been number one in his own class. As it was, he was only rated behind Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields in the class he came out in. And now that he's come back from the knee, I think he showed great leadership last year, waiting his time patiently, being supportive of Stetson Bennett and Dwan Mathis, even as he was relegated to the scout team. And now that it's his team, I think that he's asserting himself well, and you can see why Kirby Smart has delegated so much authority to him.
Well, I think if you say that you think he's been overlooked a little bit, I think if that is true, Mike, to me that's all based on the fact that while there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about Daniels and plenty of reason to be optimistic about year two of Todd Monken, they are also working together in the midst of what is a pretty substantial transformation because, Georgia, last couple of years, prior to their arrival, was not an offensive juggernaut. This was a very good team, but if you want to compare Georgia to the very best offense in the country, that comparison does Georgia no favors. And so, I do think being a little skeptical of, well, it certainly seems like things are going the right direction, but can they really put it together for a full season, especially in light of the George Pickens injury? If there is any doubting of Daniels or doubting of this Georgia offense, I think it's probably based on the track record of what happened before they arrived here that now Daniels and Monken have to answer for. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think there's some skepticism if Kirby will let the offense go, but Georgia's also had one of the best defenses in the country, and therefore, they didn't necessarily have to try to play that style. Part of what comes with amplified play count and more of an open attack is less defense because you put your defense out there for more plays and you risk more turnovers and play less field position football. I do think, though, because Georgia's reloading defensively, I think Kirby realizes that it's going to take more offense. And I think he does have trust in JT and Todd Monken based on the fact that JT's the highest-rated quarterback coming back in the SEC based on the last 4 games of last year. And I guess if you want to be skeptical of the competition, Mississippi State, Missouri, I thought Cincinnati was a legit top 10 defense, but some still wonder. Of course, Vanderbilt was a no-show, so we can't count them. But, if you want to be skeptical of the competition and the numbers he put up, I think you could. But still, it was a 400-yard passing performance in his audition, and without J.T. Daniels, they lose that football game, and they may lose a bowl game. Without J.T. Daniels, Georgia may well have finished 6-4 last year.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is interesting about this, Mike, is, and we talked about this in the show a couple of weeks ago when Smart first spoke about it, and getting a chance to have Daniels on display in front of the media yesterday, another example of this. By treating Daniels like the starting quarterback, he obviously is, but sometimes it's been Smart's prerogative kind of not to treat his quarterbacks that way. I think it only makes it even, more comfortable to have the spotlight on you, give you more of a mantle for leadership, and, frankly, more of a responsibility to say the success of this season is going to be determined by how well we develop this guy, how well we build an offense around him. The other thing that I like about all of this is the fact that Daniels is being treated like the starting quarterback, especially since it's obviously true. It just makes sense to do it that way. But this, to me, is also kind of a refreshing change from Georgia, given the fact that that's not always the way things have been done in regards to that.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, but I also think that, because of the way Justin Fields came in and the demands that he be given an equal shot, that I don't think that they could just hand it to Jake Fromm, and so they didn't. And to your point, he never named Jake Fromm the starter going into 2018 or at any other point of that year. Every year, every week, Kirby said there was a competition. Now, 2019, I don't think anybody needed to say anything. I don't think anybody thought Stetson Bennett was competing, so it was kind of a moot point in 2019. But then last year, once again, it was up for grabs, right? You wanted to make sure that Dwan Mathis had a fair opportunity to win the job, which he did in fall camp. However, the offense was better with Stetson Bennett in there. I think we saw that against Arkansas, and then Stetson kind of took him as far as he could before he got injured his shoulder, and then he wasn't able to practice. And so JT kind of got the job by, I don't want to say by default, but it wasn't like JT beat out Stetson Bennett. Stetson hurt his shoulder. JT couldn't throw that week. JT came in and and had a wonderful performance against Mississippi State. So there have been some extenuating circumstances. I don't think he could have named Jake Fromm the starter over Justin Fields and held the promise that he made to Fields when he came in to allow him to compete every week. So to your point, and I think you were the first one that noted it when Kirby named him starter, named JT the starter, I think this is a different situation, and I think every year is a little different. And I also agree with you that it makes it easier for JT to lead because he has only been on campus less than a year.
I think the addition of Tyke Smith is a big thing for Georgia, Mike. Now, it doesn't solve all the issues in the secondary. You've still got to figure out, to use an overused phrase, lockdown corner, things like that. That's not exactly what Tyke is going to be, more of a guy covering over the middle. But I do think the presence of whether you want to call him a nickelback star or a safety, whatever you want to say he is, a guy who played at an All-American level at West Virginia, I think makes the job of whoever's on the field with him at Georgia now easier. To me, it's clearly this is a need for Georgia. Kirby Smart has done nothing to downplay the significance of the need for help in the secondary for that group to kind of step up and replace some pretty big-time guys who are no longer here. And I think going out and bringing in Tyke Smith is a really bold move. I think it's exciting for UGA. What do you make of the Smith situation?
Yeah, I agree with you, B.A. I think it's needed. I think it's warranted. I think it's important. The fact that Mark Webb is moving on, as well as Tyreek Stevenson transferring to Miami, that leaves an opening there. And I think we're still going to see Adam Anderson play there some. I think, Kirby and Lanning both like to play a lot of package football. And against some teams, I just don't think you can put Adam Anderson on there if they can spread you out there too much. And that's where a guy like Tyke comes in. Now, I'm going to temper my expectations a little bit. I think he's a very good player, but I think being an honorable All-American at West Virginia is different than being an honorable All-American at a place, where you had to go through Florida and Alabama last year. So I think he'll be solid. I think he'll be good. I think he'll fit in. I think the competition is increased. But honestly, I'm just as excited about Christopher Smith and the gains that he's made in the offseason. I just posted a story on that. So I think the secondary all the way around is getting a pick-me-up. And again, to your point, I still think they need another corner through the portal.
Yeah, so so let me do that. I want to do two things you just said there. So you think that there's a chance that Georgia's not done in the transfer portal as of yet. Obviously, this echoes of what a lot of fans have kind of been speculating out loud about, but it sounds like you don't think Tyke Smith is the last big-time transfer Georgia adds before they get ready to go to bat for the 2021 season.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if that were the case. I think they absolutely have to add a corner.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would certainly welcome that, and whether it's giving some of the guys who are here a chance, I'm also kind of okay with that too. But obviously, I don't think, given the fact that Georgia's got the scholarships available, I don't think the arrival of Tyke necessarily means that Georgia can't go out and add somebody else there when it comes to that situation there as well. I think that is certainly very interesting. But on the subject of Christopher Smith for a second, Mike, when Christopher first signed with Georgia, I interviewed him in December of that year, and he's great young man to interview even back there as a high school player. And you kind of talked to him for there a little bit, and then a few weeks later I saw him again. This is January, right after he'd enrolled at Georgia. He came to Atlanta to receive a high school award, and just in that few weeks' time, it seems like he had added some weight. He'd been clearly working out hard, and that's kind of before he got to Georgia on his own. He was clearly as eager as he could be to kind of, mass up and, get some muscle on him before he arrived at Georgia, because he knew that was something that he really needed to do. And, to me, to talk to Christopher, a couple of times during that time and how committed he was to competing once he got at Georgia, the fact that he had some success on the field a year ago, and the fact that, he feels like he's in a position to lead for this team here this upcoming year in that safety spot, that's not a surprise to me, just given I don't know, Mike, just the tenacity that he sort of approached his arrival to Georgia at, based on, a couple of times I got a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, B.A. And let's be honest, when you're sitting behind Richard LeCount and not getting to play much, it's really hard to keep your edge. And I know they say, you got to be ready, but it's really hard to go all out when you're not going to play that much. And he really didn't play that much. But, last year, those last 5 games of the season, I think we all saw that he was a little too small. I think he was a step too slow. I don't think he was as sharp as he could be. And I think he took that personal this off season because he realizes, hey, the job's his for the taking, and he looks like a different guy. So I know what you're saying. You know, he had that original burst, you know, coming out where he wants to go to Georgia Ready. Okay, well, he goes to Georgia Ready, and, well, you're backup. You know, but this offseason, he's taking it to heart. I mean, he looked really good. He sounded good. I liked what he said about welcoming the competition from Tyke Smith, how it's going to push everybody to, you know, become better, even Tyke, you know, and welcoming to the family. I mean, Christopher Smith sounds like a leader. He sounds like someone who knows his time has come, and I'm eager to see the improvements from him on the field. I think the secondary in general has gotten a really a good lift this offseason from the addition of Jamal Adai and Will Muschamp and a recharged Kirby Smart. I'm just sensing a lot of energy there, hearing great things about Jalen Kimber. You know, Keeley may not be ready to go, but it sounds like Kimber is another guy that needs to add weight, who knows his assignments, a top 10 player out of Texas. Don't think we've talked enough about him either.
So let me just kind of open this up more broadly before we let you go here. What else is on your mind related to spring practice? You know, one of the things I've talked about, I think, a lot on yesterday's show is I think the unanswered questions around the offensive line are a pretty big deal. Now, I don't necessarily think it's heading towards some sort of calamity, some sort of bad thing for Georgia necessarily, but I do think the unsettled situation at left tackle, you know, center, I guess, probably there as well. I do think those are issues worth paying attention to. I've told people that I think the most interesting moment of G-Day will be seeing who kind of comes out there starting five for that, you know, what you think of as the first team offense to begin the game. I'm very curious about that, and you know, we'll see how that evolves again as you head towards, you know, and through the summer. But you know, for me, offensive line's pretty top of mind right now. In addition to that, what else are you thinking about here as spring practice? Really now, only a few practices left before G-Day next Saturday. As it gets ready to wind down, what else is on your mind?
Yeah, you know, I'm with you on the offensive line. It's on my mind, but it's not a big concern. You know, obviously receivers emerging. We've heard about Justin, you know, Robinson and what he's been able to do. I think some of those freshmen are talented, but really don't know enough about the offense where they'll be much factors not anytime soon. I'm still curious about the running back race, BA, because I've talked to some people that were at the game, at the scrimmage, and they say it's just evident that Kendall Milton is the best runner now. Del McGee says he'll start the guy that's the best, but I go back to when he started Elijah Holyfield over DeAndre Swift, and I'm just not convinced anybody's going to start but Zamir White. I think that's Del's guy, and even if Kendall is clear-cut better, I think Del's going to go with Zamir because I think he loves Zamir. Zamir's put a lot of work in. I'm hearing Zamir's improved on his receiving. I know JT talked about that. Zamir came back for another year. So that's really intriguing to me to see if the best guy starts or if the loyalty and the experience wins out like it did with Elijah Holyfield over Swift. And also wonder about James Cook's role. Now, Cook is going to be very involved, but with Pickens going out, you heard Kirby say they were going to spread it out. Man, I think James Cook could end up being the biggest benefactor, and I'll be curious to see how they use him. I know they lined him up in the slot before, but could we see more of James Cook lined up in the slot and less of James Cook at tailback? And then one other curiosity, Dejon Edwards wasn't out there. I haven't heard anybody mention that, but that's something, you know, I don't want to say you dig into because medical records and injuries are private, but that's certainly something that we should probably ask Kirby about. Problem is now you only get one question with his Zoom, and you better make your one question count, and then it's on to the next guy. But that hasn't come up yet. I'd like to find out the status of Dejon right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that, so I guess that is worth kind of paying attention to there a little bit. But to go back to what you said about Kendall Milton and Zamir White a moment ago, do you really think that Del McGee and Kirby Smart would play White over Milton if Milton, as you describe it, was the better player, that they would play White instead out of a sense of loyalty? I have a hard time putting that on Del McGee and Kirby Smart, believing they would do it that way if that is indeed the case.
Well, they did last year. You know, Milton looked better last year, and so did Kenny McIntosh, and the metrics told you that. But
what metrics were those now? I'm sorry, what metrics were those?
Yeah, the metric that showed that Kenny McIntosh led the SEC in broken tackle rate, and the metric that showed that James Cook was the most explosive running back in the SEC as well on PFF. I did a couple articles on that. But to Zamir's credit, he was a guy that could, pass block better than the others. He was a guy that was more familiar with the playbook. But there were times in short yardage where he was stopped against Tennessee at the goal line on a fourth down carry. I thought Kendall Milton, BA, was better when he was healthy last year as a runner. This year, I think Kendall, with the benefit of spring, will definitely be better. And I do think that based on what happened with Elijah Holyfield starting over DeAndre Swift, I do think there's something to be said for coaches that like to go with older, more experienced players. This isn't the only place I've seen that happen.
Well, just to be clear, though, about 2018, the beginning of the season, DeAndre Swift was hurt. You'll remember Kirby Smart, eventually acknowledged that he had the hernia surgery. And even if Holyfield was the player on the first snap of the game in 2018, certainly by the time that Swift was healthy by the end of the year, he was getting no shortage of carries. So, I mean, it's not, it's not the full story to say that Holyfield started over Swift, because by the time that Swift was healthy, he was getting plenty of carries. And I guess my point on this is that if Kendall Milton is as deserving as many carries as what DeAndre Swift got in 2018, don't you think the Georgia coaches will give that to him?
Time will tell.
I think that's a very interesting thing to say about Del McGee and Kirby Smart. Both they would intentionally play.
I'm not talking about Kirby Smart. He doesn't control that. Del controls the substitutions at running back.
So you think that Kirby Smart is powerless to I mean, it's just putting a lot on the coaches to say they would intentionally not play a player that was better than somebody else out of some sort of sense of loyalty. That's putting a lot on them, Mike. I just want to make sure we're careful about that.
I think it's safe to say that nobody's perfect. I don't think the best players always play. I do think loyalty and experience plays into coaching decisions. If your running back can't block properly, you don't have a lot of trust in him back there. But one thing, like I said, you're asking me what I'm seeing and hearing,
sure.
And I'm hearing that Kendall Milton is a level above Zamir White right now, and I'm curious to find out if that will equate to a starting position in the fall. I don't think Zamir came back to be a backup, and I do think there's something to be said for how much Georgia put into recruiting him and how hard he worked to get back. But I do think Kendall Milton is a better running back than Zamir White. That's where this conversation is intended to go. Now, again, to your point, who starts and all that, DeAndre Swift was healthy at the start of 2018. He aggravated the groin against Middle Tennessee, and that's when he came out after just 3 or 4 carries. But he was healthy at the start of the season, and Elijah started over him. And if you look at the track record, they like to start guys with seniority. Again, that's nothing new, and that happens other places. But I think when you've got a talent like Kendall Milton, I think you've got to turn him loose, because I do believe he's better than Zamir White, and I think most people that have watched this closely would probably agree that he's a better running back with the ball in his hands.
All right. Well, I certainly appreciate your candor as per usual, Mike. We'll look forward to reading a bunch from you at DawgNation.com, and I thank you for being here on the program here today.
Thanks, B.A. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So a few things on this. First of all, I just think it's factually untrue to say that DeAndre Swift was healthy at the beginning of 2018. He was only getting, small handful of carries in those early season games. He was ahead of Elijah Holyfield on the depth chart the previous year. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with the facts in that particular case. And listen, you can be excited about Kendall Milton. Obviously, on this show we are. You can be excited about Kendall Milton without turning it into some sort of, running back controversy that somehow, Del McGee is going to be a blind loyalist to someone, Zamir White, who's been in the program a little bit longer. I mean, I think just given Del McGee's track record as Georgia's running backs coach, I would suggest he deserves a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt than that, especially on the evaluation of someone else's eyewitness account of what happened during a scrimmage. But obviously, Mike's got a right to his opinion however he wants to express that there. That's just kind of my take on all of that. Hey, before we do our SEC through, and as I said before, interesting news on ARIK GILBERT, at least new twist in that rumor. We'll do some of that with you here in just a moment. Before that, though, let me remind you about my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. Makes your house feel better on the inside. The energy stays where it's supposed to be. makes your house look better on the outside. Pella's got a national reputation, but they're also a family-owned local branch right here in Georgia, which means you get great service, and you get a great deal right now there as well. You can currently get 10% off your entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. Also really easy to get in touch with. A couple ways to do so. 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496, or PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. PellaofGA.com/DawgNation for more on that. So I guess Ed Orgeron at his press conference, LSU is in the midst of its spring practice, much the same way that Georgia is, has talked about some productive, and I believe that was the word that Orgeron used, productive conversations that he's had with ARIK Gilbert. Now, it's one of those things on this show, we try to be careful about speculating too much, but one of the things that we did say a few weeks ago, and I felt comfortable saying this, of, well, just given everything that's going on, you almost wonder if Gilbert just ends up going back to LSU, and it seems like on the basis of Orgeron's thing there, the door is open for him to do that. And here's the thing I want to be really, really clear about saying here for a moment. There's a lot of people who kind of want to look at this situation and say, just too much drama from ARIK Gilbert, more drama for ARIK Gilbert. I really think that is unfair. And by the way, I got no dog in this fight because it's obviously clear now Gilbert's not coming to Georgia. But, he went to LSU, wasn't happy there. Seems like he may have wanted to transfer. Maybe he kind of bought into kind of a bad sales pitch about, hey, come here to Florida, be the next Kyle Pitts, whatever else. But, a lot of folks could potentially fall prey to that. The folks down in Gainesville reported that he had some academic issues, and sometimes the easiest place to get that stuff cleared up is back at the school where you were before. Maybe it's not his perfect choice, but maybe for now it's at least his best choice. If all of this ends up with Gilbert back playing at LSU again, trying to make the most of his college experience, I don't think people should be ripping him online for doing that. I mean, much the same way during his recruitment, a lot of the hysteria around Gilbert was kind of, created by people like me who just think he's a really good player and therefore have great curiosity about where he goes. But it's not like Gilbert's on social media talking about this stuff all the time. He's not doing, Instagram lives one after another, kind of, asking folks where they think he should go. He's just trying to figure all of that out. He was in the transfer portal, and maybe now he's not going to go anywhere. But I don't think he should be criticized for that necessarily. And if anything, my words ought to be taken as objective, because I said before, I want him to come to Georgia. Now he's not, but I'm certainly not going to criticize him for, the decisions that he has made, if that's indeed kind of what goes down. At LSU, a more significant issue than whatever happens to ARIK Gilbert is some of the stuff related to, legal proceedings, Title IX stuff that's going on. A lot of this related to former LSU running back Darius Guice. We haven't talked about this on the show all that much because, frankly, it's kind of confusing. There are new details every day. Guice has been accused of a number of things, including sexually assaulting a elderly lady. Come to find out, it sounds like, she has also kind of gone to LSU in search of some, monetary payment, which, she has, I guess, a right to pursue. But, that story kind of takes more twists and turns. LSU employee is now, suing the school for $50 million on the basis of what she felt like was retribution against her because she tried to bring some of these, Title IX infractions to light. It is a lot to keep up with at LSU right now, and a lot of it certainly does not paint the school in very good light. Of course, former LSU employees getting in trouble other places, because what happened there. F. King Alexander was forced to resign as president of Oregon State. Obviously, Les Miles out as Kansas coach. Jeff Long, the athletic director that hired him at Kansas, he lost his job there as well. Up until now, we have not really seen a lot of people, at LSU lose their job related to some of these, sexual assault allegations and, just kind of improper behavior allegations around that organization, LSU Athletics. But this story is kind of ongoing and continuing and probably worth paying a little bit of attention to. Another story here from the SEC, and this doesn't really have very much to do with football, to be honest with you, but I'm sort of fascinated by these SEC soap operas. So Darla Moore, you may know as, along with Condoleezza Rice, one of the first two female members at Augusta National Golf Club. Big-time, high-powered financier, I believe is the way that she's commonly described. She's also the biggest donor to the University of South Carolina, giving more than $75 million to the school, not the athletic department. I don't believe she's much of a sports fan, but giving it to the school. Well, she's also in a feud with the university. A lot of this, at least online and, various media reports would suggest related to the hiring a couple of years ago of the current university president. But her mother recently passed away, and she has written a letter that's been obtained by the Charleston Post and Courier where she just excoriates, I believe that's the right word to use there, just excoriates the university because they did not reach out to her upon the death of her mother, and says essentially that she regrets every dollar she ever gave the University of South Carolina. So there is quite a soap opera going on the academic side at South Carolina, and that's probably not great timing given the fact that the administration also looking at a new football coach. There was debate about whether Frank Martin should be removed as basketball coach, and it's kind of a weird time there around the University of South Carolina, made even more weird by the person whose name is on the School of Business, who's given almost 9 figures to the school, saying that she wished she had never given a dime to it, done anything to support the University of South Carolina. But that's a big story that's out there right now. And then finally, there's this. Caden Salter, 4-star quarterback signing to the University of Tennessee, who is currently indefinitely suspended because of a role in, I guess, what's been described as a sort of a violent altercation on campus. A few other football players were involved in that there as well. They are also currently suspended from the Tennessee program. Salter has gone on social media and apologized for his role in all of this. I don't know if that's the first step towards kind of a return to, active status for Salter within the Tennessee program. But, and I'm not, making light here, but between Beasley, who's suspended for accusations of animal cruelty, the 4 players who were kind of involved in, this situation, there are a lot of players at Tennessee right now on a roster that was already thin. I think you've got, a good handful are also currently suspended there as well. You got major roster issues at Tennessee right now, so we'll follow that. Salter has given an apology, and we'll see if that returns him to good graces there with Josh Heupel, the new VOLS program. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. As we get ready to wrap up here today, I don't have this to show you, and I apologize, but I want to give the golden shoe today to, believe it or not, this may be our first time to ever say something nice here. UCF coach Gus Malzahn, somebody sent this to me on social media. So apparently UCF, a lot of colleges put up billboards everywhere, and I wish I had this to show you. I just don't have it today. But a lot of colleges put up billboards all over the place. I guess in this particular case, UCF has put a billboard right in Gainesville, Florida, that says something to the effect of 137 miles from here, or however many miles it is, that a college football power is being built, and it shows Gus Malzahn as coach there at UCF. Pretty good little level of trolling of Florida by, generously call one of its in-state rivals in UCF. So Gus Malzahn will make you the golden shoe winner here today. How about our Gator Hater countdown as we get ready to say goodbye to you? 206 days from right now, Georgia goes back to Jacksonville. We think they beat those lousy, stinking Gators. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. We certainly trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for us, and we, I think you would say, know that they can be trusted to do all that for you. The RS stands for rapid service. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. They will take good care of you. Make sure you find them online. R.S. Andrews here today. We'll take your comments, and we can take the Gator Hater off the screen. We'll take your comments and find out everything that you want to say here. If we have a good time related to all of this, let me go YouTube first today, because I think it was on Facebook yesterday. We'll go YouTube first today related to all this and see how folks are doing. Jay Shipes on the subject of LSU. Yeah, they got a lot of issues right now. And it's, like I said, it's difficult to know how all of this is going just because there's just new developments each and every day. And sometimes I'm a little hesitant to take a lawyer's, because lawyers are obviously working on behalf of their clients. So sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant to take them as kind of a source in some of this kind of stuff, and you want to kind of see how the dust kind of settles before you make any kind of definitive statement. So we haven't talked a ton about the LSU stuff, but it is certainly ongoing, and it's a little bit of a mess right now. George Mullahan, also not a fan of LSU there as well. Frank Patterson checking in on the program here today. If you want to, Connor, I know you're doing 1,000 things, but if you want to, we can throw the Gator Hater off the screen here for a moment. All right, let's see what else is going on the YouTube here. String Gene says, I don't think we've seen the best from Zeus as of yet. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. I mean, here's the thing. I'm completely open-minded to whoever might be the best running back at Georgia. Is there a chance that Kendall Milton ends up being that guy this year? I absolutely think there's a very good chance that's the case. Milton is a phenomenal running back prospect. But do I believe, as I debated with Mike, that Del McGee would look at Milton, secretly acknowledge that he's the best, and still plays Amir White anyway? I just think that Del McGee's earned more than that in terms of, that's almost like an intentional act of self-sabotage to say, through some sort of sense of loyalty to Zamir White, I'm going to play White over Kendall Milton, even if Milton is clearly the best. I just don't believe that's the case. I have no idea who among them will be the best. As a Georgia fan, I'll be happy for any of them to have success as long as the Georgia offense has success overall. But I certainly don't have any kind of lack of belief that Dell McGee is capable of making the right choice there, nor do I have any kind of lack of belief that Kirby Smart is so impotent that if McGee was making the wrong choice, that Kirby wouldn't step in and make a different choice. That's just not – I just don't see the program working that way. And I also am just going to be very careful not to kind of cultivate and I'll use air quotes around this, a running back controversy out of thin air when, for the most part, there are going to be plenty of carries to go around, and I just don't think that's worth doing. DogFan3 says Milton could potentially be our number one back. He absolutely could be. I mean, that's, you go out and get a back of that caliber. That's exactly what you expect him to be, and maybe it's going to happen this year. Wildman Slayer also weighing in on this. I look for Zeus to play his best this year, just like Nick. It takes time to come back from one of those type of injuries, and maybe that is the case. Maybe there is a sense in which you get a better version of Zamir White on the basis of more removed from injury recovery, or maybe there's the fact that he ends up maybe not quite being as good as we once thought he could be. But I think only time will tell on that. Connor Riley joins the show.
This can be my one comment because I know people hate when I do this, but the way people are talking about Kendall Milton right now sounds a lot like the way people were at one point talking about Zamir White. And, I do think Kendall is a really good running back. I was saying this before even Mike was. And I think, what happens if he doesn't have the season that everyone expects? Are they going to turn on him? And turn may not be the right word to use, but is he going to become sort of that next Zamir White of, people are already pushing him out the door for, say, a Branson Robinson, whoever, Kenny McIntosh, whoever down the line there. I think we have to be careful, and I think you're doing a good job of saying, let's not create a running back controversy when there really isn't one.
Yeah, I mean, now, if it's one of those things where if a guy got 10 carries and gained 100 yards, another guy got 15 carries and gained 50, then obviously at that point in time, fans are going to want to see more of the other running back, and that just, sort of stands to reason. But I don't think that you can use 2020 alone as evidence of that, because I just think you're talking about a very, very small sample size in that particular case. Connor, I think that's a good thing to weigh in on. DogFan3, and somebody else was also mentioning Brock Bowers there as well. Yeah, I'm really excited about Bowers. I think he brings a lot to the table, at least potentially anyway. Stacey Goebel says, I'm not sure it's all that provocative of a take to say a coaching staff would show loyalty to a player like Zamir. I just think that you're going to have a hard time finding an example of Georgia doing that in the past. I mean, certainly in 2019, as a for instance, you had a senior running back in Brian Harry and been in the program longer than Zamir White had, and yet that particular year, Zamir White got more of the carries than, that was like that 1 year in Georgia's entire tenure in Kirby Smart that they essentially had a one running back situation. They gave White, I don't want to say percentages because I'll get them wrong, but he was the back. That was not a tandem running back situation there that year. In 2017, it was DeAndre Swift getting carries over guys who had been here in 2016, like Harry and like Elijah Holyfield. I just think you have a hard time saying any true example of, out of sheer program loyalty and experience, Georgia chose this back over that back. There's just no evidence to support that. Anybody can have whatever opinion they want, but we have to kind of agree on the same, facts here related to all of this. By the way, Robert Barnes, I believe, a normal Facebook commenter, am I right? He's on YouTube here today. That's kind of interesting to see. Ron Warbington says, are we going to have 100% capacity for this upcoming season? I would say we're turning in that direction right now. Many of you may have seen the photos coming out of Arlington, Texas, Major League Baseball ballpark. That was full here just the other day. North Carolina, where Georgia's first game is slated to be played against Clemson, they're at 50% capacity right now. There's also a NASCAR race there coming up Memorial Day weekend. We may see expanded capacity for that, or at the very least 50% there for Charlotte Motor Speedway. So I think we're heading in that direction. Obviously, we got to keep people healthy and safe, and by now that should go without saying that when we're talking about these kinds of things, we're also kind of assuming that there as well. But at least here in this area, the numbers looking pretty good these days, and the chances of having full stadium there at Sanford Stadium and full stadium in the places that Georgia's playing, I think there's a chance that's the case. And listen, I don't think there's any I've told y'all this before. I like to watch like the one shining moment thing with my kids, and last night we were watching it, and I'm thankful to have it. That's the music video of the Luther Vandross song that plays at the end of the NCAA tournament. And listen, we're all happy to have it, but it was no doubt that thing was just really just kind of tepid, that you don't have any fans in the stands. It's just not the same kind of one shining moment. You don't see the crowd going crazy, and there's no pep band, playing the instruments, things like that. We've made the best of the situation over the course of the last year plus. But the resounding comment you've gotten back from sports fans on all of this is this is not what we want sports to be, that this is not just a made-for-TV product, that there is something about the connection between the live fans and the event itself that matters here, and people want that back. I think there were people not watching sports this past year because it didn't feel real without fans. I think it's a very interesting just kind of social study of why it is that sports felt so different without fans, even though the overwhelming majority of sports fans just watch on TV as it is. But the games clearly felt different to some people. They did not feel as real. So whether you're going to be at the games or not, it seems like people want the games to have fans again. All right, let's see. Silent Chaos says, I'm excited for the Masters, but I wish Tiger was in it. Yeah, I continue to wish Tiger well, and just hope he's back healthy again very soon after a very scary situation. But clearly you think about him a lot this time of year just because of, the great history that he's been a part of there at Augusta, including a couple of years ago. So there's no doubt Tiger's presence be greatly missed here at Augusta National. Let me get some Facebook comments here for a moment as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down. And I hope all of you are doing well and having a great time here today, having some fun. All right, let's see if I can get this pulled up. All right. Matt Rugavina says the one thing this team will have this year that didn't have the past few seasons is senior leadership across the board. I think that's true, and I think that when you also kind of get that coming from a quarterback, as Terrence Edwards has said before, and he's not quite a senior, but he's almost old enough to be, that when you get that, I think you're even better shape because of that. Bill Sanders says really wanting 100% capacity at Sanford Stadium this fall. No better feeling. Yeah, there is no better feeling than that. I've really missed it. Sometimes when I'm I try to be on the elliptical and things like that. You can't look at me by telling, but imagine how fat I'd be if I wasn't trying to exercise. The point is that when I am on there, sometimes I go on YouTube and kind of watch some of these old Georgia games and, some of the pregame stuff that gets recorded and things like that. And I just love to hear that crowd, roaring in my headphones and kind of reliving some of those moments. I really, really enjoy that. It's the kind of moments in which sports kind of become somewhat transcendent, when you really feel like you're a part of something that matters, and you just don't get that with fake crowd noise, with fan cutouts, with the stuff that we've had. You just don't get that. And, I kind of wondered, well, with sports forced to be unusual for the last year, how much would things actually get back to full normal once you kind of, start moving back in that direction? And I think the consumer demand here is fairly obvious. People want things exactly like they were before. That's what people want. They want the bigness of all of this. They don't want it to be, like your workplace, for instance. A lot of people are thinking, well, maybe we'll just do Zoom meetings forever. I can't really speak for, how that's going to, be for the work community, the office places around the Atlanta area here. But I can say in the world of sports, this idea of, hey, we've kind of gotten used to all this remote stuff. We want this to kind of stay in place forever. That is not what sports are going to be. At least I don't think that's what the consumer wants sports to be. Michael Webb says year 2 of Todd Monken's going to bring more running lanes thanks to more, I think he's saying thanks to, more high-powered passing attack. And I think that's really true. I mean, here's the thing that you kind of suffered with in 2019. And, Georgia had been, compared 2018, 2019 for a moment. Georgia back then was still capable of having a pretty successful offense. Georgia was, close to the, one of the highest scoring teams in the SEC in 2018, even without, much in the way of, passing attack. And they were able to do that because they were still really good at running the football. But eventually that kind of runs out on you. Once teams don't, value the threat of you throwing the ball over top of them, all of a sudden they start crowding that line of scrimmage. And in 2019, what Georgia found out was, hey, if we're not throwing the ball well, all of a sudden now it's hard to run the ball too. stacked lines of scrimmage, stacked boxes. We all saw that so much. And a lot of those, measurements that you use of, how effective running game is, those numbers started going down for Georgia in 2019 because you just simply didn't have the passing attack to serve as the counterpunch there. Well, now you think about 2020 and things started to look a little bit better. Georgia throwing the ball more made running the ball easier. I mean, even like the South Carolina game, for instance, where some people were kind of unhappy that on the heels of what Georgia did against Mississippi State, they didn't throw the ball more against South Carolina. But, I mean, there's a possibility that all those running plays that Georgia ran, I think they ran almost like 10 yards a carry, certainly the first half of that game they did, that all of that was made easier because of what Georgia had shown in terms of its ability to throw the football in the previous week. And the 2021 team, at its very best, is some version of that. A team that, attacks deep downfield, throwing early in the game and on early downs. That's what the best teams in the country are doing. It's not about how much you throw. It's about when you throw. Do you throw in first and second down? Do you throw on 2nd and 7, as a for instance, in the first and second quarter of the game? By the time you got to the fourth quarter last year, even a team like Alabama that was scoring 100 points a game, they were running the football plenty, almost exclusively in a lot of their fourth quarters a year ago, but they were just gashing you with the big passing plays in the, on first and second down in the first and second quarter. And that's what I think the evolution for Georgia is going to be in those early down situations. When the game, when the tone is being established for the game, is that when Georgia chooses to throw the ball? And if it is, then they should be set up very well for running after the fact. All right, a couple more comments here. Matt Talley weighing in on the running back topic there as well. Vaughn Jackson says, you said the same thing about Fromm and Fields, if the coaches wouldn't show loyalty over the better quarterback. I think it's difficult to know how the Fromm Fields situation would have played out over the course of the long haul. I think a lot of people assume that because Fromm played over Fields in 2018, that he would have also played over him again in 2019. And, I've said before that not playing Fields more that season, I think, has proven to be a mistake. But I was also of the belief that that competition was not going to be a one-year thing. It was going to be static, and somehow, once Fields, if you want to say he lost out to Fromm in 2018, was doomed to sit behind him again the following year, I think there's a very good chance that Fields would have had his chance to eventually overtake him. So you can't say for sure how that would have played out because, Fields left and went to Ohio State before that one had a chance to fully play out. But just keep this in mind, though. If you say that Kendall Milton is the better running back than Zamir White, then just keep in mind what you're saying about Del McGee by comparison, okay? I am certainly willing to acknowledge that Milton may be better than Zamir White. I mean, it was obvious when you saw Kendall Milton's high school film how good he had a chance to be. But if you're saying that for sure that Milton is better than White, if you're saying that for sure, then you're saying something fairly unpleasant about Del McGee that I'm just not willing to say. Jermaine King, by the way, says he likes Zoom meetings over real meetings. Boy, I'm not with you on that one, Jermaine. I don't like Zoom meetings. He says I can just turn my cam off and take a quick nap now. Well, now from that standpoint, that's maybe not quite so bad. Sam Hazeltine says, how are we looking for the 2021 and 2022 season for football? Things seem to be going pretty well right now. Clay Dyke says a starting job, in my opinion, is only one play. After that, it's situation dependent. That's a pretty good point. I mean, last year Georgia probably didn't sub as much at wide receiver as it seems like it has in previous years. But wide receiver is typically a pretty good example of that, where they're rotating guys. At least in the old days, they didn't do this as much last year, but rotating guys every play. So starter is essentially a ceremonial designation more so than anything else. Let's see what else is going on. Sam Hazeltine says, are they going to have the G-Day walk for the fall? I think he's asking about a dog walk for G-Day. There was no real discernible dog walk at all during the season. Is there more of that for G-Day? My guess is they probably just take the same pregame routine they had for the 2020 season, and they use that for the upcoming G-Day, and which means very little in the way of dog walk. A couple years ago, back when they were doing some work around the Tate Center for G-Day, they did kind of a cool dog walk for G-Day where they like kind of wound their way kind of, in between the Tate Center and where the bookstore is and kind of up those stairs, players with the jerseys on. And that was a fun dog walk there that day, a little bit different than what they normally do during the year. But my guess is everything related to G-Day is essentially a carbon copy of what it was during the season. And then by the time you get to the fall, I'm fairly confident they'll be doing dog walks, things like that again, I'm guessing. Randy Hall says, hey, before the end of the year, you got to have another event at Marlowe's, got to get the chortle button going, and he says you got to start doing Fan of the Month, which has always been Randy's idea. Randy, we'll see if we can get that done for sure. Thank you very much. Phil Rogers says, season comes down to, can we control the ball and the clock and play your best players? There you go. Cliff Hancock says Cook's going to produce at wideout this year, much similar to the Bama game last year. Yeah, 85-yard touchdown for him there in that spot. A couple more. Miriam Martin Corbin says, you still owe me a Marlowe's event in Kennesaw. Miriam, hopefully we're able to do that. I'd love to be able to do that very soon. All right, one or two more here. Matt Rugavina says, this is a random comment, but we're coming up on the anniversary of your shows from home. That was a fun time. Yeah, every now and then, my wife will show me a picture, like, how I guess it's Facebook that does this, the 1 year ago today type stuff, and it'll show me with a beard starting to grow in. I'm glad that y'all enjoyed that, because I tell you this, I hope to never be doing a series of shows like that from home ever again, or at least with that particular setup. I wouldn't mind, being at home for the show, but just something a little bit more substantial than the Zoom stuff we were connecting with last year. But I'm glad y'all had fun with that. And you're right, we are certainly coming up on a year on that kind of stuff. Chris Pope says, how many fans they allowing for GA? It's about 20,000 or so, I think. And those tickets have been hard to come by. Hard to come by. All right, let's see what else. Anything else on the Facebook side before we go back over to YouTube? Scotty Gorp says, bring back the beard. Honestly, some days I look at the beard and think maybe I should bring it back, especially when my face is fat. Some days I think maybe I should do that. I kind of enjoyed it. It was weird drinking things with it because it kind of run down your face. Ben Green says, I'm one of those that wants to see some explosion in the passing game, but first, incomplete pass I see, I'm still going to be yelling, run the dang ball at the TV. Yeah, Ben, I think a lot of us are in that kind of that same boat of it all sounds, well and good until it doesn't work. And by the way, Kirby Smart sort of said some of that same kind of stuff before of, when people have said, hey, why weren't you playing more up-tempo, things like that. He has said in the past, this is going back a couple of years ago, of in some cases we were trying to be more up-tempo, but if you don't complete the passes, it's sort of hard to get into that up-tempo rhythm. So Smart himself has said some stuff in the past that's fairly similar to that. Green Soldier says, who's your lookout for player at wide receiver? And while I normally, he says that he disagrees with the take on the running back situation a little earlier. So I'm going to kind of join the fray here. I'm not certainly predicting breakout here, but given some of the stuff that Terrence Edwards has said as of late and some of the stuff that Kirby Smart said yesterday when asked, I am really curious to see more about Adonai Mitchell. I mean, it is fairly obvious that I didn't give Mitchell as much attention as I could have. I was also not at work at the end of last year, so that kind of affected some of that kind of stuff. But didn't give as much attention. This is a very interesting player in terms of the fact that his kind of months preceding his arrival at Georgia a little bit different than some of these other guys kind of have been. Terrence making the comparison to Justin Jefferson at LSU has kind of stuck in my head here a little bit. So I am curious to see what he kind of brings to the table. I think it's certainly worth paying attention to. I think that's worth paying attention to for sure. Enrique Murillo, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Frank Patterson also wants to see the toss sweep. I love the idea of that for sure. George Monahan says, do I use just a touch of gray? I do not. When I went beard, I let just the thing grow, and I told y'all if it comes out like Santa Claus's gray beard, I'm gonna have to shave it off. But I let that go. My hair is just natural. I don't do any kind of anti-gray product, any kind of is it Propecia or something like that keeps your hair from falling out. I don't do any of that either. This is just This is just all me as God made me, for the good and for the bad on all of that front. Hey, thanks to all of you for being here on our R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. Make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them to do all of that. Also, Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. More on some of the, the voting controversy. If you want to go there, you can find out more about that. Also, more stuff related to the coronavirus and how we're kind of handling that and hoping to get back to normal. All that serious stuff. We don't do that on this show, but of course, staying up to date on what's happening in your world is very important, and you can get all your Atlanta News Now online, ajc.com. Certainly on the fun end of things, really good coverage of the Masters. Long history the AJC has of great Masters coverage. And that continues again this year there as well as they get going. 6 dogs in the field, Augusta National starting tomorrow. No par 3 this year. It's a little bit different, but all the way around. Just a really fun thing. Plenty on that there. Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Y'all have a great day, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.